At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
And finally, I can't take it anymore. And I was like, Mom, I did Ancestry DNA and I know everything. And she's like, I'm not talking about this. I'm going to leave. I'm leaving. I'm going out of the house. I'm like, where are you going to go? It's COVID. What are you going to go get COVID? So then she's in the kitchen. She's like angrily doing dishes. And I walked in and I told her this one piece of information that we found out in the sleuthing time. And I was like, all right, Mom, the silver lining to all of this is I found out I'm a distant probable cousin of Princess Diana. And just ridiculous. And she looked up and she was like, only you.
Welcome to DNA Surprises, a podcast that delves into the world of unexpected DNA discoveries. I'm your host, Alexis Auersalt. In July 2021, my life took a surprising turn when I found out that I'm an NPE, a person who has experienced a non-paternal event. In other words, my biological father isn't who I thought he was. Join me as we explore the stories of NPEs, adoptees, and donor-conceived people and their families. Get ready to unravel the astonishing journeys that begin with a simple DNA test. This is DNA Surprises. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. If we don't laugh, we'll cry. DNA Surprises can be gut-wrenching and difficult experiences, but some of us can find humor in almost any situation. I first met this week's guest in a peer support group at the Untangling Our Roots conference, and she made me laugh then. In this week's laughter-filled episode, Lauren LoGuidice tells the story of how she learned she was donor-conceived. Lauren discusses how she never fit in with her raised family, but was regularly dismissed and gaslit when she questioned why she looked so different. She shares how she connected with her donor-conceived siblings, her genetic father, and how things are with her parents today. Lauren doesn't disguise her journey with humor. Rather, she infuses it into her storytelling. You can check out Lauren's comedy, including the latest on her upcoming film, at her website, linked in the show notes. Thank you for sharing your story, Lauren.
My name is Lauren LoGuidice, and I am originally from Queens, New York. It's interesting to be on a podcast called DNA Surprises when like it wasn't a surprise because like I kind of knew something was up, but then it was a surprise because it's like I had gaslit myself so much by then. I was like, oh my God, I can be correct because I had told myself for so many years that what I think means nothing, what I believe is full of bullshit, and also my intuition is worthless. And so by the time that I got to a DNA surprise, I was just like, I'm surprised that I'm not awful and that I can be right. So I grew up, like, it was very obvious that I did not look like my family. So I grew up in a very Italian-American part of New York City. And I realized as I do comedy throughout the country and the world that people don't always know what Italian-American means. And Italian-American is like, if you look up Godfather or you look up like The Sopranos, yeah, a lot of that's accurate. I don't have to tell you. A lot of it, the stereotypes are true. They're based in something. And less because more people have moved to the suburbs and joined a gated community and learned to golf. But where I grew up was very stereotypical, very, very stereotypical. It's part of New York City, but it might as well have been Kentucky. No offense, Kentucky. Love you, Kentucky. I'm sure there's cultured Kentucky. But let's just say the most uncultured place of every state, wherever the state is.
I'm gonna get so much hate mail now.
So much Kentucky. And also, if you are uncultured, you're okay. But the thing is uncultured people I grew up with did not like difference at all. At all. They would abuse, bully, torment anyone who was different than them. And this is important because not only was it they didn't like difference because of their small-mindedness, but also there was an orientation they had to this is black and this is white, which is different in how my genetics work and how my mind works and how my genetic paternal parentage and line is, because we are a people of gray area and comfortable with not being totally stable and not knowing the answers to things. Whereas everyone I grew up with was either you're this or you're this. Basically, either you're okay or an asshole. So that all early on, it was mind bending how my mind literally didn't fit in with these people. Also, I joke about it a lot. I was very different. I joke that yes, my parents got the sperm donation and they just thought, oh, the kid won't notice a thing. Meanwhile, they ended up coming up to my hip and my nickname was Milkman's Baby. So that was all true. People think when I go on stage and talk about how different I am than my family and then about my DNA surprise, people think, are you just saying that for the bit? No, because you can't make that up. It was me and my dad would go. I played a lot of basketball because I was tall. And my dad always wanted to be tall because of his sports career. And then we were I was reenacting his sports career as I was going, because he had this tall kid that could do well in basketball and worked hard just to make him proud, make him like me.
And you were an only child, correct? Do you have others?
I had 3 kids after me, which made the whole thing confusing.
Okay. Did you look very different from your siblings?
Oh my God, totally. They were little replicas of my parents. And then I come in bumbling in the room like Gulliver amongst the little Lilliputians. And the thing that they could bank on, because they're a black and white kind of people. And also they pray Italian. And this is not to say they're bad people, because I think this is an Italian characteristic. Because I was reading Elena Ferrante and my brilliant friend, and she talked about Naples, this expression, this of disdain that her brother gave someone. I'm that is what my brother does. So I think there's something of this jumping on the weakest link in the room. And I was always the weakest link because it's not, to them, it's not strong to be waffly.
Okay. Yeah. The black and white, going to the black and white thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, so people would point it out a lot, and it made it even more ridiculous because it'd be we walking down, my family, mom, my dad, and then it'd be me, and then the rest of them.
And this was just explained away how, because everybody in our community, when we have something that makes us stand out, there's always some grandmother or uncle or someone that's oh, you got this from that person. So how did they explain away your height?
Yeah, they had 3 different methods because it was so extreme and a daily basis kind of thing to deal with. The first one was my mother's I have a picture. It's your great-great-great-grandmother. You look exactly like her. And I looked at this. I had a better chance of being mistaken for Simone Biles than this woman. I don't know what they were talking about. And I outright was rejected that. I was this is bullshit. Then she's no, but still, she dug in. She dug her heels. The second thing is my grandfather. Now, this guy was off the boat from Sicily. He never graduated high school, but he went to the library like an MIT research scientist to come up with one fact that he thought could explain me. And he was like, yeah, the Vikings invaded Sicily.
Of course. Of course.
1,000 years ago. So
it just landed on you.
yeah. And yeah, just that's it. And I mean, I'm the idiot who believes it. So I was like literally walking the streets being like, hi, I'm 100% Italian-American Lauren from Queens. I know I don't look it, but the Vikings. And this all inspired, by the way, a movie called Honestly, a short film that we're now in editing for. It's very exciting. Yeah, that's because it's so ridiculous. Like you can't even, I've tried to show this process to so many people and what it does to people. And like through stand-up, through sketch, through character, through clown, I had to like visually show this. The third thing they did was they just said it's all in your head.
Oh, full gaslighting.
Yeah, full on gaslighting. It's all, you get dramatic. You think these things are not there, which is super gaslighting. So it, did not do well for me. It was not good.
At what point do you then make your discovery and take your test?
Yeah. So I'm like sitting there, I would like tell people would meet me. I'd be like, hi, yeah, I'm Lauren. I'm Italian, blah, blah, blah. I don't really look like my family. And I think it's because the Vikings. And we're not sure. And blah, blah, blah. This was like a main through line of my life. I started doing stand-up. And actually, I did a solo show. And they watched me do a solo show about how this like feelings of like not fitting in and said nothing. So I'm still like trying to figure it out. My therapist told me, she was like, dealing with all this stuff. And she's like, you're adopted. And I was like, I don't think so. Cause my mom was pregnant. And she's like, I don't know. I'm just telling you, I know like families who've kept secrets and there's something up. Then I got a letter in the mail. This is as an adult. Like I'm trying to still like moving in the world, being like, I am different. I don't know why. It isn't mine. I'm never going to be able to find out. The letter said, we represent a birth mother who placed her daughter for adoption, who was born in the same hospital as you on the same day. So I'm thinking like, okay, now my mom was pregnant, right? And like, I don't think my dad was cuckolded because my mom is boring. So I was thinking maybe I was switched at birth and then the wrong person was adopted. So in good faith, I show my dad this letter and I'm like, Dad, don't you want to meet your like biological child? Because maybe this is it. And he got so angry with me. Like my girlfriend at the time, she was there at the dinner when I showed it to him. And she was like, I would just put that letter in a drawer and never think of this again. So it's so weird in our community, like in these stories, how often we don't take action. We're like stymied.
What did you think when he reacted that way? And you were thinking this actually might be the answer to this mystery. And then he completely dismisses that. So how did you feel?
I just felt really frustrated that he was being shady, and that frustrated. It's like, I know there's something up. There's no way. And I'm like, should I get a detective to like get my dad's floss? I'm thinking this. I didn't know what to do. And all along these DNA tests have been coming out, but I never put it together that this could be the answer. Like I never dreamed that could be like, why would like an ancestry DNA test? That's like what people do to like do their family tree and all that stuff. I never put it together. It's like the answers are literally, like you're saying, it's right there. And we ignore it. We ignore it in this way. Our mind is trying to just keep us sane. It's like the movie, when you watch the movie and you're like, don't do it, you idiot. And it's like, well, denial is deep. Yeah. It took me months to call these people. And I finally call them. And then they're like, the birth mother found the person. They did a DNA test, like they're a match. And I was like, fuck. So not knowing what's going on. And then a friend tells me they do their ancestry test. And they're like, oh, I found out on this and that. I'm like, oh, maybe this could be it. So I get it, the results. And they were confusing because mine were from like Italy and England. But my brother's, I looked at his was from Sicily and Greece. And I was like, but do these tests even measure anything? Like, are they accurate? So then I posted them on Facebook, and my mom was in the comments like, end this shit now. Again, I should have been like, shady. It's so shady. They're so defensive. so defensive. And even I had asked my dad during that time, why don't we just do a DNA test? Because maybe we are maybe it switched to birth. Don't you want to know? No. And she was afraid of what other people would think if I posted stuff like that. Because I am making other people judge her. So I ignore the test. I put it away. Again, in the movie, you're screaming, "You idiot! How could you?" I can imagine being in a script meeting where they would be like, "But no person in the world would let those results go by." Yes, they would. Yes, they would.
Yes, and they do.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All the time. So yeah, I have all these DNA matches that don't make sense. And I'm like, this thing is bullshit. And I ignore it for 3 years. And I would talk about this. I would talk in circles about it. Be like, I know that something's up and something and the test and blah, blah, blah. And no one apparently knew science or logical deduction because no one could have been like, see if your dad's cousins are on there. No one had that thought. I finally talked to someone who did. I mentioned it. I had a PhD in genetics. A PhD. And I was like, okay, this is the situation with my results compared to my brother's. What do you think? And he's like, I'd look into that. And I was like, but isn't there natural variability between siblings? And he's like, not by that much. I was like, are you sure? Again, so I was talking to a PhD in genetics and I'm questioning him, but could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be this? Could it be that? And he said, I did my PhD thesis in this very subject. And I am telling you that there's something wrong. I got back from the trip and still waited. Then a few weeks later, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm just not ready to do this. I don't know. I got to figure it out. I need time. So a few weeks after I get back from the trip, my mom gives me a picture of my godfather, who is tall with fair features. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe she's trying to tell me on the low, this is my genetic father. And I don't think my dad got cuckolded. So I will defend myself. I am defending my mom's honor by saying, this is what I thought. I thought, and I'm a queer person, so stick with me. I thought that my dad had a secret bisexual crush on his best friend, my godfather. They had a threesome with my mom, and then I was y tu mama también into existence.
Oh, wow. That is such a story, the narratives. So you kind of made it make sense, right? Both of your parents were there, they somehow knew.
Yeah, it all happened for a reason. It was to help my dad deal with his sexuality is how I came to be. That was the most satisfying version I could think of.
I love that. Okay. How much time passed between you getting this letter from the hospital that's really making you think, oh, maybe it's a switched at birth kind of thing, to now your conception involved a threesome for your dad who is confused? I
think it was I got to get that letter. It might have been 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah. So a lot of time passes, a lot of time to kind of create stories that make this super confusing thing make sense.
Yeah, in my head. Yeah, I was just I don't know what's happening. And then you just you're I cannot let go of these stories. So you wait. And then when my mom gave me that photo, I was like, okay, the opportunity's knocking on the door. This might be concrete evidence. So, because I knew I had to get her to talk, because if I couldn't get her to talk, or someone to talk, because this was such a big secret, I was I need to sleuth on my own. She gave me this photo and now I need to go all the evidence and then present it to them and be I know. You can't. I know. Because if I am living in denial, those people, forget it. Right. So they're really attached.
So what do you do with this story that you've invented? Did you actually confront your parents with it?
Well, I actually asked all of these DNA matches if they knew my godfather, because I'm thinking he's a man, he's cute, he's around Brooklyn doing his thing. So I'm thinking he's around Brooklyn, with all these different people. And I didn't know who all these DNA matches were. And then I called Ancestry and they were oh, they're definitely your siblings. And I was 15 are my siblings. They were oh, definitely. So I asked them all, do you know my godfather? I figured out that my dad wasn't my biological father, right, like this is like within this mishmash of like a few days of getting the picture of my godfather. Because I went on the computer and I called my brother, and that's when I was like, let's compare DNA matches. And I was like, okay, do you see me? He's like, I see you. And I was like, do you see mom's cousin? He's like, I see mom's cousin. I was like, wait a minute, didn't dad's cousin do DNA ancestry? And he's like, yeah, I saw him right here. I look him up, my cousin, my dad's cousin. And then it says there like very clearly, not related.
I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnne. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
It's time for basketball, and Uber Eats is dropping deals on game day favorites to keep you locked in on the action. Like when you're craving a buzzer beater, but also buffalo wings. Or when an upset makes you want to ugly cry into a pizza. And right now, Uber Eats has game day deals from McDonald's, Popeyes, Pizza Hut, Wendy's, and hundreds more local favorites. So you can keep your eyes on the ball and your hands on a hamburger. Order now, only on Uber Eats. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
Which means, like, my dad can't be my biological father.
And how did that hit you once you realized it?
It was funny to see, like, my therapist's reaction, because it was, like, 2 weeks in a row where I was coming in and I was like, I think something's up. I think it's maybe my godfather. I don't know. It's just so strange how she said this. And then she was like, I never worked with anyone with this before, and just keep present with it, blah, blah, blah. And then I came in the next week and I was like, I found out. And it was like everything we had been working on in therapy, like improved by like 110%. Because it was just like, I went to her being like, there's something wrong with me and we're going to figure that out.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, there's nothing wrong with me. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. I was being gaslit. So thinking it's my godfather, I'm still holding on to this thing. I was like,
it's still him. Okay. It's still him in your mind.
It's still him in my mind. Cause I'm like, oh yes, this thing happened. And then I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I'm holding on to this because I'm like, well, listen, like he could have had a thing with my dad and like also other people. And then someone in this, I'm talking to this sibling pod now. We go into a Facebook Messenger group and we're all trying to like compare information. And one of them said, my mother told me that she used a sperm donor. And I'm thinking like, okay, my godfather, Brooklyn guy, checks out 100%. And then at that time, I'm like, okay, let me try to reconnect with my godfather. And I send him a FedEx, which probably got thrown right in the trash because it was like a FedEx that was like, hi, your goddaughter just saying hi after all these years. Hope you're good. He was probably like, oh, this is shady, and like shredded it immediately. And I didn't have his apartment number either. So I had to like find his like apartment building, and then I would send the FedEx and it got delivered. So I don't know what happened.
Had your parents like lost touch with him over the years? Like
they stopped talking to him when I was 7. Like when you get a lot of your features.
Considering that he's your father, right?
Yeah. And it could have been, I think still, I'm wondering what that relationship was like. I'm like, I wonder if because he and I had similar features that people raised eyebrows and that's why they stopped talking to him. But they'll never tell me the truth. Because even if my mom doesn't know, like maybe my dad wouldn't even tell my mom that. Okay. And maybe my dad doesn't know it consciously, like he might have been like, oh, he was this or that. But like,
I know there's always like so many questions that we end up having, right? Like,
just with people who don't really want to fork it over.
Mm-hmm. So you don't hear back from him.
I don't hear back from him. I'm in this pod group that's like, we don't know who this guy is. We don't know who your godfather is. And it's a sperm donor. And then someone's like, well, the doctor told my mom that he used a med student's sperm. And I'm thinking like, they probably all say that. They're like, oh, trying to make you feel better.
Yeah.
Because at the time they basically just opened up the med student door and was like, who needs beer money? Like That's the level we were working with. And I wish I was exaggerating. So one of my siblings took that like quite literally. And they were like, okay, let me go check this out. Let me go ask, why don't I ask all the cousins? Because one of the cousins might know if there's another cousin that was in New York as a med student. That's like a pretty big thing. Like usually people remember that. Like, oh, so-and-so was a med student in New York. Like that's something that people remember. So he asks them and someone said like, hey, yes, there is someone in our family that was a med student during the years that you guys were conceived. Let me go ask him if it's okay to connect you. And then he did. He connected us and he said yes. And she gave us the phone number and the name. Now, during this time, like this same sibling was like sleuthing like crazy. And he was like, all right, everyone, like don't nobody do too much. Cause like, I'm about to crack this whole thing. And it was like purely like just innocent curiosity. And I think he has no idea that like this could be big for a lot of people.
And in this time, are you feeling connected to the sibling pod? Are you identifying similarities between you, or what's the nature of the relationship like?
We didn't meet at this time. I talked to one of my sibling pod, the one who's doing all the sleuthing. We had a conversation like the day after I made this discovery. And he's like, let's talk about this. I don't know. I keep getting messages from people. I don't understand how we could be connected. So let's talk about it. So yeah, when I talked to him, it felt like familiar in a way because we had said, a lot of my sibling pod, not all of us, we have similar minds, and that's really comforting. And he was so good at like in curious minds, and we all have that in common. And that led him to just like sleuthing, finding an obituary connected to a first cousin, getting the family line. We got the daughter's name, and then we found her on Facebook, and like in 45 seconds had pictures of our genetic father, which was wild. And I was like, oh, I look so much like him. Mm-hmm. And a lot of like questions in my mind started to be answered. And then I call him and we have a conversation, and he had a dad. He's not my dad, but he had a dad joke. He was like, tell your mother she can't get a refund. And then we're just like normal people usually. I don't want to say normal. I want to say our community.
Sure.
Laugh at that real hard. Our people in our community are like, no.
Yeah, it's a little different. It's a little different.
We understand more. They could just, it's funny the edge that like is funny to other people because there's stuff that we laugh at that they have a hard time. It's a different.
Sure. 100%. So you see him, and when you see him, you see yourself.
100%. It was the best moment of my life. I recorded it because I was like, I just put like a recording. I'm like, if this work, sometimes recordings don't work. I didn't get crazy with like, mics. I just like pressed like record on my Evernote. And I was like, if this is meant to be, I'll get it. And I'm so glad I did. And I'm so glad it worked because it's my voice is so happy. Like it's so, you can't make that kind of happiness up. I saw myself for the first time. Big case of genealogical bewilderment. Like I never understood what I looked like because I didn't understand where I came from or where was my genetics from. And so meeting it, like I understood my body in place for the first time. I was able to understand like how I hold myself, or I'm like, oh, that's what people see. Like I never understood how tall I was. So I was playing small. It's like this weird thing of like, I was just hanging out with some family. And I noticed I've been like working on getting some of these habits out of like ways I move my face or my body to like make myself smaller. And I noticed I started to like almost go into that. And I'm like thinking, it's not that they're expecting me to. They're not like, you must act this way.
Right.
It's like was so insecure and so uncertain and so sad and so anxious about who I was that I made myself small because it was more comfortable. It was more comfortable for them. Not all of them, but there are some of them who are like my best friend. I call her, my best friend, my first cousin and first crush. She was so mean to me. And part of it was because I was this like tall, skinny bitch. She fucking hated my guts. She's this like Italian German person who was very mad at me. She was short. She was always very short. So she was always very mad at me. And I learned, like, your body remembers that. And just, it's like, oh no, I never want to be big because then people are going to hate me.
Yeah.
So meeting Jim was the first step to undoing that. I was like, I understand what I look like. Because in my head, I was like this little Italian. Like, I just didn't understand. I was just in doing some clown training, which is not actually like circus clown. It's more about improvisation and stage presence. And they just had you walk. And that was so difficult, not only for me as an NPE, but like so many people in the class. It's so hard to be yourself. Just the walking, they would be like, you're moving too much. Like you have a bounce in your ankle, and that we can tell you're hiding. And it was really powerful just to learn to like how to, and I'm still unlearning. Like it's going to take a long time. And I feel this stuff is so ingrained. Like I'm going to run into it continually throughout my life, which is just what it is, but it's okay. It's new level, same devil.
For sure. For sure. What happens next in your journey? Do you confront your parents?
So once we meet up with the genetic father, we all have a meetup and we hang out with him and we continue to hang out with him. He came to one of my shows. He's a crack up. He's so funny. He's just like a good dude. And yeah, it's like a nice to have a parent who hasn't had the chance to traumatize me yet. So that's exciting.
Yes.
And then with my parents, so once I knew, so back it up to where I had pictures of our genetic father. Also at that time, COVID was closing down New York City. And I'm like, oh shit, I gotta hear this from my mother's mouth. And this cannot be done on a phone call or Zoom or anything. I have to hear it from her mouth. So I drove through New York City. I was like hiding out in Jersey. And I drove to New York City all the way. She moved out to Long Island, all the way out and far out Long Island where she is. And I was going there knowing this, which is crazy. Is that, which crazy I say, but like in our community, it's like norm, that the sibling with all the who did all the sleuthing, he noticed we had a common friend on Facebook and he called the common friend and he was like, hey, how do we both know Lauren? And the common friend was like, well, you had a mom who'd passed, and that mom was my best friend. But I had a second best friend, and that was Lauren's mom. So when he realized that, like, what he just uncovered, he was like, I'm going to go. Why don't we just keep this between us until this is all figured out? And then she said, of course, no problem, and hung up. Then immediately called my mom, told her everything. My mom still denied it, still in like that deep denial mode. And then, but at that point though, my mom knew, like she knew that I knew that she knew. And so I ring her doorbell and she is nervous and she's just talking a mile a minute. And I go in her house and then finally I can't take it anymore. And I was like, Mom, I did ancestry DNA and I know everything. And she's like, I'm not talking about this. I'm going to leave. I'm leaving. I'm going out of the house. I'm like, where are you going to go? It's COVID. What are you going to go get COVID? So then she's in the kitchen. She's like angrily doing dishes. And I walked in and I told her this one piece of information that we found out in the sleuthing time. And I was like, all right, Mom, the silver lining to all of this is I found out I'm a distant probable cousin of Princess Diana. And just ridiculous. And she looked up and she was like, only you. And so I then started reading her facts. This is the place. This is the doctor's name. And she confirmed it. Then I was like, were you ever going to tell me? And she was like, not until my dying breath.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did she say if your father knew, or was that a question mark for you at that point?
Oh, I asked. I said, did Dad know? And she gave me such a look. Of course he knew. Like, don't even try to say. Okay, Mom.
I'm picturing Edie Falco, by the way.
Yeah, that's kind of accurate. Don't even try to say that. And then And then I was like, well, what happened? Why was dad all that time? Why was he so like defensive? Why was he so defensive? And she's like, because he knows I would have put a knife to his throat. That's why. It's like, all right, Mom. I will protect my daughter till my dying breath, is what she said. Which is just, she thought this was protecting me, covering the secret up for as long as she could, even though I was an adult and I could handle it. Since that time, she's done good. My mom has like come to my shows and she's very supportive. And like, she was afraid of judgment from some people, but like times have changed. And people in anything, they're like, oh, wow, you did like this in the early days. And like, she did it without the hormones. Like my mom was like ready to get pregnant. She was like, give it to me. Let's go. And so my mom is like some cred, you know, now she's like, oh, what can I say? My daughter.
What about your dad? How does he feel about it? Because I feel like there's shame, stigma for men who struggle with infertility. How does he deal with it?
It's hard because it's the Italian thing, which is like the Italian whatever. And then there's, which I don't agree with, but I have to respect that that's where it was always brought up. Then there's the like Catholic thing, because the Vatican has come out against sperm donor kids and everything. My dad was like, damn it, now we pissed off the Pope. So he felt like he didn't really, completely unequipped to deal with both my parents, completely unequipped to deal with any of this. No tools, no counseling, no recommendations, no reading material, no children's books. Like we have so much now. And it's exciting because the new generation there's lots of work, but certainly there's some steps taken.
How long were they together before they had you?
They were together, I think, for like 3 or maybe 4 years.
Okay. So maybe they'd been trying, it wasn't happening. Then they had you, but then you said after you, they had 3 more children.
Yeah.
Did they have anything to say about that?
I did. I was like, well, what happened? They're like, well, he had it like some sort of thing, and which I joke about in my show. Come see when I do my hour show called Misfit Meltdown. And, he had some issues, and so then they thought they could have just like, we're gonna just be able to have one with this sperm donation. It was either the doctor was like, there's no way. Either you're going to adopt or you're going to use a sperm donor. Pick one. So my mom really wanted a kid. She was like going to have a kid. And she was only 26, but like Italian Catholics were like not waiting to 30 to get pregnant in 80s, 90s.
Okay.
Like that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So she was very intent on getting pregnant. My dad didn't like kind of understand even what was happening, and it happened. And then it was put in his face every day. People looked at him like he was the cuckold, and that was hard for him. And I told him I knew this. It wasn't good. It's still not great. It's still like this weird thing between us. I don't think he's even told his girlfriend that he lives with, his longtime partner. He's still he doesn't want to talk about it. He will not come to a show anymore. He did not even acknowledge the fact I was making a movie about this. And it hurts a lot. It hurts a lot. And in some ways I'm like, what can you do? And in some ways I'm like, I really try to stay away from like anything of like, it's my fault or, those are easy to have.
Right.
And comedy helps.
Yeah. Do you feel like he treated you, and it's hindsight's 2020, but did you ever feel like he treated you differently when you were growing up?
Yeah, I do. I do. And I think my brother even noticed it. Like he was like, I noticed like there's a difference in how he even talks about you. He's really hard on you. And it's easy to like demonize me. It's better for him to demonize me and make me into a bad person so that, if it's always my fault.
You've touched on some of the comedic relief that has helped you get through. Can you talk more about that and how you've used comedy and art to process this?
Yeah. So when this was happening, I I was doing comedy. I was doing stand-up in character as Melania Trump at this time. And then like that more or less ended on January 6th. And then, because then it became not funny anymore. And then I needed something else to happen. And then this happens. It was like, I needed like a new project. And I remember telling this new sibling, I was like, this is going to be my life. I know it. This is going to be it. And he's like, isn't that amazing? You can help so many people. I'm like, oh my God, fuck. And I just knew that this was going to be one of the focuses moving forward. And so I started doing stand-up, and then I was like working on that and undoing all of this like stuff. I noticed like I was having just a hard time talking about it, and the ways I was like almost masking myself. So I was doing stand-up as myself for like a few years, figuring out my voice. COVID was working itself out. And then I started something which started as Ancestry.comedy, but I changed it to Misfit Variety Show. It's a show that incorporates like stand-up, storytelling, character, often a guest expert in this like night of like very joyful fun. And I noticed that people who were attracted to the topic were misfits. They were like people under, like, I was like, oh, this speaks to like something much deeper that unites a lot of different groups together. This idea of like not quite fitting in, having this family that you're not sure where you fit with them. Like a lot of these themes came up. So I turned it to the Misfit Variety Show because it was more inclusive of all of these experiences I wanted to put in one room. And then I'm working on my stand-up, doing a bunch of shows around New York. And then I'm like, could I do an hour? And then my friend challenged me, like, go do an hour. So I went to Edinburgh last August with an hour called Misfit Meltdown. And I'm still working on that. That's still in development. And I will be doing that again, definitely at Edinburgh next August, and then potentially a few other times. So that's like an hour where I talk about this and like identity, queerness, family, community, all in that hour.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And tell me more about your film.
Yes, I'm trying to develop something about this genealogical bewilderment, and I couldn't figure out how. I did stand up and I did a clown act. I did so many things. And then finally it was like, I wrote the script in a writing class, and she was like, all right, we're going to work on your short film. Just like take a moment and think about like writing something around that. And she gave us a timer, which I love timers. They're so good. She gives us 5 minutes, go. And then I had to sit there and write it. And then it came out, and it was about this woman who believes she's a Viking. She's me if I didn't have art and in a way to express myself. She's all in on the Viking. But she's like has issues. She's like super gaslit. She like lives at home, and she's way too old to be living at home. And she works at the Viking Voyage ride in Adventureland. And she goes to the like Viking exhibit at the Natural History Museum. And she's very like regiment. She just was obsessed with Vikings, and thought about like, what if she's about to go discover her roots and her family's going to like, what's going to happen? And someone's doing a documentary about her, and kind of like realizing that there's more to the story. What's going to happen? What is she going to do?
Did we explicitly say what you found out that you are?
Oh, we didn't. Oh, so I found out. So I thought I was 100% like Sicilian and all Southern Italy. And then I found out I'm English. I'm basically half English with a sprinkling of some French and Northern Europe.
Hence the Princess Diana.
Princess Diana. Yes.
And you said you're in editing right now. When are you expecting that the movie will be out?
So basically in the next, I think 6 months to 8 months, we'll have like a premiere. And then for the next like 2 years, I'll be like, hopefully knock wood, bringing it around, showing it out.
So I can't wait to see it. I cannot wait to see it.
I can't wait to share it with you. I hope it's good. It'd be interesting. I'm definitely going to have to do a test audience with like community, and then a test audience with like just lay people, because it's like a different experience watching it, I think.
Where would you say that things stand now with your discovery? Have you made peace with it? Are you still grieving? Is there still any anger? Where are you at now?
I think it's so hard. Like, I was at Untangling Our Roots last year, and I'm like, things are good. Duh, yeah. And then they did a thing. I realized that, like, we were at the closing ceremony, and I'm realizing that both my grandmothers, like my maternal and paternal genetic grandmothers, both had the same name. And it made me cry so hard. Thinking of like what my grandparents would think, what do they say? It gives me comfort to think of like my grandfather, because I know he would have said all the right things. My paternal grandfather. Yeah, I'm certain of that. And my grandmother too. But more my paternal grandfather, because I think he had the right idea with how to make people feel loved, I think. That he liked, because he was also grumpy. But if he liked you, he wanted you to feel loved. So I'm still like going through that grieving. And yeah, I mean, you think you've figured it out, and then it's just because it's so hard. I went through and told like most of my family, everyone knows now, like right before launching Honestly crowdfunding, I was like, I have to tell everyone right now because I want them to find out from me. So I would like told a few people, did the calls, did the message, whatever I needed to do to make sure everyone heard it from me first. So I'm more out about this than ever. Like, I'm still shy about putting stand-up clips. I think I'm making myself put up a stand-up clip a week about it. So coming, maybe you'll hate it. It's okay. I'm so afraid. Like, so
gotta put yourself out there. Yeah.
I just gotta and then if it stinks, you won't see it because the algorithm. That's great.
Trust. I know. If people want to follow you and try to beat the algorithm, what's the best way for them to find you?
Right. The best way to follow me is to go to my website, Lauren, LoGuiDce.com. And there you can sign up for my email newsletter, which I highly recommend because the algorithm will prevent us from seeing each other. Like, let me just follow you is the worst way to ever follow someone. FYI, the worst. I know not everyone does email. If you Lauren Logie is my tag on all the things. You can find me in all the things in that. And if also when you sign up for my newsletter, you will get updates on Honestly the film. Just go to laurenlogie.com. All the stuff's there.
I'll include all the links in the show notes too.
Thank you.
Who want to find you. All right. I ask everyone 2 questions at the end of every episode. Right. So the first question is, what advice do you have for a parent who's keeping a DNA surprise from their child?
The one thing I would say is I feel that you're probably afraid that the kid's going to hate you. And that's valid because the kid might be mad, but the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be. And they're definitely going to find out. And if they don't find out when you're alive, they'll find out when you're dead, and then they're going to hate you postmortem. And you've lost your chance to make it right with your kid. So that's one. And 2, this it didn't make me not love my parents. Like, having a third parent in your life doesn't make you not like your parents. It makes you just your heart expand and you realize how much more capacity for love you have. I want to tell my dad, Dad, don't worry. There's no chance you could be anything less than my father than the amount of time I've spoken about you in therapy. There's no way. You're my dad.
And what advice do you have for someone who just uncovered a DNA surprise?
If you uncovered a DNA surprise, and I'd say be patient with yourself, go sleuth away. There's a huge community out there to support you. Reach out to resources, reach out to community, and know what you need and ask for it and be unafraid. And maybe you need to leave and come back to it. That's fine too. Just take care of yourself. It's going to be a ride. Maybe, some people don't. It's they feel shame because they're I don't know, it's just kind of a thing. And I'm whatever. That's cool. That can be you. No shame. No shame. You don't have to have any sort of dramatic experience. But if you're having a dramatic experience, then that's okay too.
Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. You share it with such humor, but also realness. There are real feelings involved here, and you aren't covering them up with humor. You're just telling your story. So I can't wait to catch your stand-up, and I can't wait to see your film. I just wish you the best.
Thank you, you too. And thank you for the work you're doing. You are absolutely bringing a change to the community. And I just love meeting with you and speaking and with you and the group we had. It was just fantastic. So thank you for all of it.
Thanks again to Lauren for sharing her story. If you have a DNA surprise that you'd like to share, please submit your story at dnasurprises.com. And remember, for early access to ad-free episodes, join me over on Patreon at patreon.com/DNA Surprises. Until next time. This episode of DNA Surprises was hosted, produced, and edited by me, Alexis Auerselt. It was mixed and mastered by Josh Auerselt of Siren Recording Studios.